Good morning to everyone watching us live right now. We will begin the annual stockholders meeting with an invocation to be followed by the Philippine National Anthem.
Let us remember that we are in the holy presence of God. Lord, we humble ourselves in your presence and lift our thanksgiving for all the blessings you have bestowed upon us. Throughout our company's journey and trying times, we have remained steadfast in our faith that with you, all things are possible. We thank you for carrying us during the times we needed you the most. Please continue to grant our investors, officers, directors, and employees the wisdom to do what is right and the strength to hurdle the challenges along the way, so that in all things God may be glorified. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Everyone, welcome to the 2020 Annual Stockholders Meeting of Suntrust Home Developers, Inc. Let us also welcome our Board of Directors who are here with us today. Mr. Ferdinand B. Massey, Chairman and President.
Morning.
Ms. Nioli May Elco, Director and Treasurer.
Good morning.
Ms. Josephine Marie R. Salazar, Director.
Morning.
Mr. Antonio C. Pasis, Director. Mr. Joey I. Villafuerte, Director. Mr. Alejo L. Villanueva Jr., Independent Director. And Mr. Eugenio B. Reducindo, Independent Director.
Morning, everyone.
We also acknowledge the presence of the following officers: Attorney Maria Carla T. Oikim, Assistant Corporate Secretary and Assistant Corporate Information Officer.
Morning, everyone.
And yours truly, Aldi Celis, Financial Controller. I now turn over the meeting to our Chairman and President, Mr. Ferdinand B. Massey.
Ladies and gentlemen, the annual stockholders meeting of Suntrust Home Developers Incorporated is now called to order. On behalf of the Board of Directors and Management, I welcome and thank you all for joining us. We are holding this year's annual stockholders meeting by live streaming to conform with the government's regulation on social distancing and prohibition against mass gatherings. We adopted measures to afford our stockholders the opportunity to participate in this meeting as effectively as physical meeting. Ms. Assistant Corporate Secretary, before we proceed, please certify to the posting and publication of notice and the existence of quorum.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone. In compliance with rules issued by the Securities and Exchange Commission, I certify that the notice of this meeting, the definitive information statement, along with the company's guidelines for participation via remote communication and voting in absentia, were uploaded via PSE Edge on October 2, 2020, and posted on the company's website also beginning on October 2, 2020. In addition, the notice of this meeting was published in the following newspapers of general circulation, both in print and online formats. On October 5, 2020, in the Manila Times and Business Mirror, and on October 6, 2020, in the Manila Times and Business Mirror. Mr. Chair, based on record, stockholders who have registered and are represented in person or by proxy represent 6,789,077,165 common shares, constituting 93.64% of the total outstanding capital stock of the company as of record date September 30, 2020. I therefore certify that we have a quorum for this meeting. Finally, we'd like to inform everyone that this meeting will be recorded.
Thank you, Ms. Assistant Corporate Secretary. The next item in the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the last annual stockholders meeting. Ms. Assistant Secretary, were copies of the minutes provided to all stockholders?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Copies of the stockholders meeting held on October 29, 2019 were posted on the company's website soon after its adjournment last year. Copies of the minutes were also appended to the definitive information statement posted on the PSE Edge and the company's website. The minutes reflect the proceedings of the last annual meeting, including resolutions adopted and approved, with corresponding tabulation of votes for each item then for approval.
Thank you. The minutes of the last meeting are being presented for approval. Ms. Assistant Secretary, do you have the results of the voting?
Yes, Mr. Chair. For the record, unqualified votes cast for each item for today's meeting shall be counted in favor of the matter under consideration. Based on the tabulation of votes, 96.05% of the voting shares represented in this meeting have voted in favor of approval.
Okay, with that, the motion is carried and the minutes are approved. Ms. Assistant Secretary, please ensure that the minutes of today's meeting reflect the tabulation of votes for all agenda items requiring stockholder approval.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Company's Chairman of the Board and President, Mr. Ferdinand Massey, will now deliver the 2019 Annual Management Report.
Good morning, everyone. Together with the rest of the Board of Directors and Management, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our dear shareholders and guests to our annual shareholders meeting. With the current government restrictions brought about by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we will be holding the 2020 shareholders meeting virtually. To start, let me provide you with a quick recap of our 2019 consolidated financial performance. Core revenue generating activities generated annual revenues of $552 million, slightly down 4% from 2018 of $576 million. Total revenues for the year ended December 31, 2019 amounted to $583 million, down 11% from 2018 of $655 billion. Total costs and expenses for the year ended December 31, 2019 amounted to $898 million, up 63% from 2018 of $551 million. Of the total costs and expenses in 2019, $265 million represents loss on deconsolidation of First Oceanic Property Management, Inc., or FOPMI, after the dilution of the company's ownership interest over FOPMI from 100% to 24.27%. The company's earnings per share for the year ended December 31, 2019 is negative 0.13 centavos. Total assets increased by 90% from $761 million in 2018 to $1.449 billion in 2019, while total liabilities decreased by 80% from $296 million in 2018 to 58 million in 2019. Costs increased from 257 million in 2018 to 1.278 billion in 2019, or about 397%, which is mainly attributable to the subscription of capital stock from Fortune Noble Limited in the fourth quarter of 2019. With the acquisition of 51% of the outstanding capital stock of company by Fortune Noble Limited, a wholly owned subsidiary of Sun City Group Holdings Limited, a listed company on the stock exchange of Hong Kong and primarily engaged in, among others, hotel and integrated resort general consultancy. The company will be shifting its business focus on tourism-related businesses, concentrating on developing and operating tourism-oriented facilities such as hotels, resorts, private clubs, leisure parks, entertainment centers, food and beverages outlets, and other recreational activities. It is with pride and excitement to report to you that our company has embarked to co-develop with Westside City Resorts World Incorporated a 13-hectare property located at Bay Boulevard Entertainment City, Parañaque City. As part of the co-development agreement, the company, over the next 3 years, will be constructing and developing and eventually manage and operate the following entertainment and leisure areas with an approximate lot area of 44,000 square meters or approximate constructed floor area of 20,000 square meters. Five-star hotel with more than 470 hotel rooms, gaming areas with approximately 400 gaming tables and 1,200 slot machines, food and beverage, health and wellness and retail outlets, entertainment outlets, cinema and nightclub, and more than 1,000 car parking spaces. Despite the global health crisis, we remain hopeful and confident to commence commercial operation in the first quarter of 2023. Currently, piling works and architectural design works are ongoing, and groundbreaking is projected to take place in the last quarter of 2020. Upon completion, the West Side City project will be the fourth integrated resort in the entertainment city, Parañaque City, and is expected to bring a new, vibrant, and luxurious entertainment and leisure destination comparable to other destinations in the Asia region. Together with our contractors and suppliers, we will adopt safety health measures and establish rigorous health protocols at the construction site to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in compliance with national and local government guidelines. We continue to be overwhelmingly optimistic in the next 12 months as we begin the construction phase of the company's flagship project that will increase shareholders' value in the future. Thank you and stay safe and healthy.
Next item in the agenda is the approval of the annual report for 2019. Ms. Assistant Corporate Secretary, please announce the voting results.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the motion to approve the 2019 annual report, based on the tally of votes, 96.05% of the voting shares represented in this meeting have voted in favor of approval.
Thank you. The 2019 annual report is therefore approved. May I now request the Financial Controller, Mr. Albi Celis, to read the questions sent by our stockholders.
Our first question is, what are the effects, if any, of the COVID-19 pandemic to the progress of development of the hotel and casino project?
In the current quarantine guidelines, our project team and contractors will provide quarantine camps and vaccination when already available. In case of enhanced and stricter quarantine guidelines imposed by the national or city government, in the future, the construction and development phase may be extended and commercial operations will be delayed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next question is, I understand that the project is targeted to open in 2022. Assuming that the COVID-19 pandemic will continue to persist here in the Philippines until next year, will the target date of opening still push through?
Our project team foresees no significant impact on our opening date if the current quarantine guidelines remain the same. If government decided to impose enhanced or stricter quarantine guidelines, obviously the opening schedule will inevitably be affected, and we will adjust by then. Can we read the next question, please?
There are no other questions, Mr. Chair.
If there are no more questions, we will proceed with our agenda. The next item in the agenda is the approval and ratification of the acts of the Board of Directors in management during their term. A summary of these acts is found in the definitive information statement sent to all shareholders. Ms. Assistant Secretary, please announce the voting results.
Yes, Mr. Chair. For the motion to approve and ratify the acts of the board and management during their term, as tabulated, 96.05% of the voting shares represented in this meeting have voted in favor of approval.
Thank you. The acts of the board and management are therefore ratified and approved. The next item in the agenda is the election of directors for 2020 and 2021. May we request the chairman of the Corporate Governance Committee, Mr. Eugene Reducindo, to please read the names of the nominees qualified to be elected to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Corporate Governance Committee has pre-qualified the following nominees for election to the board for 2020-2021. Mr. Ferdinand B. Masi, Mr. Neoli May L. Co, Ms. Josephine Marie R. Salazar, Mr. Antonio C. Pasis, Mr. Joey I. Villafuerte, Mr. Alejo L. Villanueva Jr. as Independent Director, Mr. Eugenio B. Reducindo as Independent Director.
Thank you, Mr. Reducindo. Ms. Assistant Corporate Secretary, do you have the voting results?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Each of the nominees have obtained the required number of votes to be elected as members of the board.
Thank you, Ms. Assistant Secretary. Therefore, the resolution electing the members of the board has been approved. Congratulations to the newly elected members of the board. We now proceed to the appointment of external auditor. The audit committee processed and pre-screened nominations for external auditor and recommends the appointment of Punong Bayan and Arroyo as the external auditor for 2020. Ms. Assistant Secretary, please announce the voting results.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Based on the tally of votes, 100% of the voting shares represented in this meeting have voted in favor of approval.
Thank you. Punong Bayan and Arroyo is therefore reappointed as external auditor of the company for 2020. The next item in our agenda is the approval of the listing of 2,550,000,000 shares, which were issued to Fortune Noble Limited pursuant to the increase in authorized capital stock of the company approved by the SEC on December 20, 2019. We submit for approval such listing of shares as aforementioned. I now request the Assistant Corporate Secretary to present the voting results on this item.
Mr. Chair, based on the tally of votes, 100% of the voting shares represented in this meeting have voted in favor of approval.
Thank you. The resolution is therefore approved. The next item in our agenda is the issuance and listing of the underlying shares to be issued to Fortune Noble Limited and/or Summit Ascent Investments Limited pursuant to the convertible bonds issued subject to SEC confirmation exemption in a waiver of a rights offering requirement of the PSE additional listing rules. As discussed in the DIS, the board has approved the execution of subscription agreements pertaining to the issuance of convertible bonds in favor of Fortune Noble Limited and Summit Ascent Investments Limited in the principal amounts of 7.3 billion pesos and 5.6 billion pesos, respectively, subject to the fulfillment of certain conditions and regulatory approvals, including prior confirmations from the Securities and Exchange Commission that the issuance is exempt under Rule 10.1 of the Securities Regulation Code. In anticipation of the potential conversion of the convertible bonds into equity, shareholder approval is being sought for the subsequent issuance and listing of underlying shares in the aggregate of up to 9,747,474,747. And for that specific purpose, the board approved for ratification of shareholders the proposed issuance of the convertible bonds to Fortune Noble Limited and Summit Ascent Investments Limited as required under the additional listing rules. Finally, the waiver of rights or public offering in the event of conversion and issuance of underlying shares is also being sought in accordance with the additional listing rules of the Philippine Stock Exchange Incorporated. I now request the Assistant Corporate Secretary to present the voting results on this item.
Mr. Chair, based on the tally of votes, 100% of the voting shares represented in this meeting have voted in favor of the approval. Further, the required number of minority shareholders approved the waiver of a rights or public offering.
Thank you. The resolution is therefore approved. The next item in our agenda is the amendment of Section 5 and 7, Article 1, and Section 6, Article 2 of the amended bylaws of the company to allow stockholders in board meetings by remote communication. The board approved this proposed amendment during its meeting on September 16, 2020. Copies of the proposed amendments were made available through the definitive information statement and the PSE Electronic Disclosure Generation Technology, or PSE EDGE. I now request the Assistant Corporate Secretary to present the voting results on this item.
Mr. Chair, based on the tally of votes, 100% of the voting shares represented in this meeting have voted in favor of the approval.
Thank you. The resolution is therefore approved. Ms. Assistant Corporate Secretary, is there any other item in the agenda?
No other matter, Mr. Chair.
There being no other matters in the agenda, we can now adjourn the meeting. We thank everyone who have joined us this morning. We hope that you are all in good health and are doing well. Stay safe, everyone.